I don't know how to feel about RGG. They won me over with their rich games, full of unique experiences, and I've had countless hours of fun thanks to them. But holy shit, there is something deeply wrong with this studio. In the latest trailer for Stranger Than Heaven, there was the reveal that the game will feature Tupac. You think he erased his name too? But as much as I want to talk about that, that's not what this video is about. This is a happy video. So now I'm gonna glaze RGG Studio for the next 20 minutes. Oh, sorry, not the Yakuza team. No, the Virtua Fighter team. Virtua Fighter Crossroads looks awesome, with a fresh take on VF. And as a massive fighting game fan who was never able to break into Virtua Fighter, I could not be more excited. This recent presentation reignited my hype for this game 1 million times over, and I just want to talk about it so bad. First, this game has a strong emphasis on remaining Virtua Fighter to the core, while at the same time totally breaking the old chains of what Virtua Fighter was always expected to be. This game's gonna have the same old fundamental 1v1 fights, but also branch into its own unique brand of action-adventure fusion combat. It'll pay homage to the mainstay characters as legends in the game's world, while bringing fresh faces to the forefront so new players won't feel like they're late to the Akira and Pai-chan party. In recent years, lots of fighting games have tried their hand at appealing to a casual audience, which in fighting games is always the core struggle. The fact remains that fighting games are rich with experiences that don't lend themselves to an easy introduction, and there's always been an obvious solution: accessible, casual experiences. As far as fighting games, the best sellers are usually your Mortal Kombats or Smash Bros, which to be honest aren't my favorite, but it's undeniable that they have strong casual appeal. But in my opinion, there's one major example to showcase the direction fighting games are headed: Street Fighter 6's World Tour Mode. Ah, God, man, how awesome is World Tour Mode? Since day one, all I've done is glaze this mode, and I feel like it's underappreciated for what it actually set in motion. And yes, I promise this is related to Virtua Fighter. In World Tour, you play as your own custom character, and get to create your own freak. But more interesting, for me at least, are the gameplay elements. Instead of playing a simple 2D fighting game, just running it back to back to back to back to back, you're instead put into a massive open city full of missions, secrets, hidden goodies. There's a decent sized story to keep you entertained, but the good stuff obviously comes with the combat. You can find Street Fighter legends across the city, and after interacting, they'll become your teacher, and you can copy their fighting style. Then by raising your bond with masters and training, you can unlock more of their special moves and begin to mix and match all of the styles together to create a totally customized experience. Now, World Tour isn't life-changing, it's like the story of a 2K game. You make your way from the bottom to the top while meeting legends along the way, but instead of Kawhi Leonard, you get Chun-Li. It's by no means great storytelling, but it's all about the gameplay experience and the control you're given. You can pick and choose your fighting style, learn combos, master inputs, and develop a knowledge of every character in the roster organically. And it's not a fucking snooze fest like Tekken 8's Arcade Quest. And if there's someone watching with decades of fighting game experience thinking, I don't know man, World Tour is kinda boring, I mean no disrespect when I say this, but it's not really for you. World Tour works as the shiny new thing to attract players with its goofy customization and generic RPG elements. But it shines as an educational tool. And if you're someone who's been analyzing frame data for the past decade of Street Fighter, I don't think you can be educated. That'd be like me deciding to read kindergarten level literature and being disappointed by the lack of challenge. This shit was made for people like me, absolute idiots. And I'm not afraid to admit it, World Tour Mode is the only reason I still play Street Fighter 6, because if I didn't have that gateway, there's just no fun way to start playing. This is the value of a casual experience, not a one-to-one translation of skill, but an engaging viewpoint into the gameplay without expectations of greatness. And this right here, this open world sandbox-ish nature is what I want to highlight. Anyway, what does this have to do with Virtua Fighter? For starters, I basically just make videos on the Yakuza series, which is developed by RGG Studio, the same RGG Studio developing Virtua Fighter Crossroads, although it's worth mentioning they're developed by different teams. During the recent VF Crossroads showcase, we got a look into the philosophy behind the next Virtua Fighter game. The core ideas were simple 1v1 gameplay isn't going anywhere, there will be a new story mode telling the narrative of 4 brand new characters, and of course, this game is being developed with the craziest team of talent I've seen. And it's actually the single player mode that piqued my interest the most, as well as a lot of other people, because Virtua Fighters never had that. While it's definitely not the same thing as World Tour from what they've shown, it has the same goal, being an accessible, casual experience. This story mode is the setup for an explosion of popularity, in the same way World Tour set up Street Fighter 6 for that influx of new players. And it can also help break the stigma that Virtua Fighter is a series purely for legacy players or esports players. And while someone might immediately react to the story mode with, "Oh no, they're ruining Virtua Fighter already by turning it into Yakuza," I think this video will put into perspective why this story mode is the greatest thing for the future of Virtua Fighter. Because while it is true RGG is developing VF6, in my opinion, this gameplay doesn't scream Yakuza, but something else entirely. Virtua Fighter's new story mode harkens back to something less Yakuza, no, something older and more foundational. Virtua Fighter itself. Let me explain. It's the late 90s, and Virtua Fighter is a name with staying power. By 1996, the first 3 games were all released to critical acclaim, heralded as the father of 3D fighters. Under the guidance of director Yu Suzuki, Sega AM2 would make tons of other huge projects, but Suzuki had an idea in the works. After working for so many years on arcade titles with experiences that only lasted a few minutes at a time, Suzuki was interested in creating a game without that time limit. AM2 started work on a few tech demos and eventually started on developing an RPG for the Sega Saturn. Virtua Fighter RPG. Akira's story. This game would feature Akira, the poster child of VF, in a story focused on his journey across China, like a martial arts epic. Unfortunately, this game never came true, and the game's development was actually taking a very long time, and the scope of the game was so great that it wouldn't even run well on the Saturn. So, the game was rearranged to release as the big new console seller for the Dreamcast. And to help make the game look fresh, they cut all ties to Virtua Fighter, and instead re-established the game as a new original story, Shenmue. Shenmue is a beat-em-up action-adventure game detailing the story of Ryo Hazuki and his very own martial arts epic, and can only be summarized as the midpoint between Virtua Fighter and Yakuza, and the blueprint for everything Yakuza became. And I mean that literally. Shenmue reinvented open-world games by introducing a living, breathing city, and because this game was originally a Virtua Fighter spin-off, it utilized the deeper combat elements of VF in the context of a 3D beat-em-up, which of course might remind you of a certain Virtua Fighter Crossroads. Or maybe it's even reminiscent of the Yakuza games. Shenmue also introduced the concept of QuickTime events, something Yakuza fans know all too well, as well as creating a plethora of gameplay elements that were massively adopted across all of gaming. But with all that depth, this game was a lot of work. Shenmue was a huge undertaking for Sega and could have turned into Sega's downfall as a company. It was a financial failure. It was a Dreamcast exclusive, which kinda doomed it to having mediocre sales at best. It was financially draining, still being one of the most expensive games ever developed to this day, and even after years, development was still taking way too long. So Sega's CEO called upon the project supervisor of Shenmue to kick things into gear, and promoted him to the role of producer and director for the final months of Shenmue's development. Who am I talking about? None other than Toshihiro Nagoshi. Nagoshi had a long list of successes at Sega AM2, working on games like Daytona USA, Spike Out, and of course, Virtua Fighter. With his expertise, Nagoshi sped up development on Shenmue to finish within 6 months. And with that, Nagoshi successfully shipped another game, this time proving he can lead a team through tight schedules and fits the role of project lead. What followed was the massive restructuring of Sega in 2000, where the company formed 9 studios. And Amusement Vision, Nagoshi's new team, was the smallest, with just about 50 members. Anyway, things took off pretty quickly. Amusement Vision came out swinging with Monkey Ball, a game that dominated arcades. And then Super Monkey Ball, a version for home consoles, which released as a launch title for the Nintendo GameCube. And side note, this right here, Super Monkey Ball on GameCube, was the first instance of a Sega game published for a Nintendo home console. And over the years, that relationship would only grow into what we know Sega for today. So it's kinda insane that many of these events were set in motion by Super Monkey Ball. But of course, Monkey Ball isn't the end of the road. Nagoshi had a dream project, an action-adventure crime thriller telling a dark and edgy story rooted in the Japanese underworld, no doubt inspired by the likes of Shenmue. This project would be a drastic departure from what was expected from Nagoshi at the time, so he had to fight tooth and nail to get the green light, and Sega probably wasn't keen on the idea of another open-world beat-em-up after what happened with the last one. But through a mix of perseverance and the now expanded and renamed studio, the new entertainment R&D department, Ryuga Gotoku was under development. The game had a rocky time being made, and it wasn't even projected to earn much, with generous projections under 100,000 copies. Ryuga Gotoku went on to sell 1 million copies. This of course cascades into a supermassive IP, 20 plus games, merchandise, crossovers. Basically, Ryuga Gotoku, or Yakuza, became a money printing machine, and the life cycle of Virtua Fighter to Shenmue to Yakuza all shared the common threads of Suzuki and Nagoshi, along with various other Sega greats. Unfortunately, Suzuki and Nagoshi are no longer with Sega, but their respective series live on regardless. But going back to the late 2000s, this marks the transition into the age of RGG Studio. And around 2010, the two series were as far apart as they would ever be. The question now becomes, how did they find their way back together for VF6? In 2012, the studio now named RGG Studio released Yakuza 5. The game used their most powerful engine yet, and in the Sega arcades scattered around the cities, you can play an emulated version of Virtua Fighter 2. This is the first instance of AM2 and RGG rekindling their flame. The Yakuza games would emulate even more AM2 games, like Outrun and Space Harrier, but maintaining a focus on Virtua Fighter. The next milestone was in 2016 with Yakuza 6. Once again making a massive leap technologically, Yakuza 6 marks the introduction of the Dragon Engine. And once again, this game features arcade cabinets with a playable Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, which meant that the latest Virtua Fighter game was playable inside of a Yakuza game. These cabinets would even make a few more appearances, and eventually they'd add Virtua Fighter 3 TB in Infinite Wealth 2. So now, after time apart, these two series developed ties in a somewhat unorthodox way, but this can be treated as phase 1 of the experiment. As of 2021, Sega's been making a massive push to revive many dead or forgotten IPs. You probably already know about this. There's the new Crazy Taxi, the new Jet Set game in development, and later added to that list was Virtua Fighter. In 2021, we'd see a new re-release of Virtua Fighter 5, VF5 Ultimate Showdown, or VF5 Esports in Japan. It's a PlayStation 4 exclusive, and I think it can be summarized as a remake of Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown. Listen, it's VF5 released for like the 10th time, so I get it, it might not seem all important, but no. There is one major distinction that makes this game very important. Ultimate Showdown was co-developed by the Virtua Fighter studio, Sega AM2, and none other than Ryuga Gotoku Studio. That's not all though, because this remake was essentially rebuilt using the Dragon Engine. Also, I almost forgot to add, this game got DLC in the form of the Yakuza series collaboration pack, and I mean, this shit's just awesome. It's not like groundbreaking stuff, it's just costumes, but obviously I couldn't ignore this. There's Kiryu Akira, there's Shundi Nanba, but there's actual bangers like Goro Misera, oh my god. And then there's Blaze looking fly. Did somebody say fly? Ultimate Showdown released as a free game for PS Plus users. So it was basically handed out, almost like it wasn't even made for a profit. And that is why I call this part 2 of the experiment. And while this game could have been a test to gauge interest in the VF series, I personally believe this was a test of how well RGG and AM2 work together to produce a game, and how well RGG's resources can benefit Virtua Fighter. And I only say that because of what comes after. In 2025, we got the most complete version of VF5 yet, Virtua Fighter 5 Revo. This is an upgraded version of Ultimate Showdown, now having even better graphics, rollback netcode, an extra character that was cut from Ultimate Showdown, and they even added a whole load of single-player content with the World Stage Mode. But the biggest change was finally making the game playable on literally everything. With a PC release and eventual Xbox Series, PS5, and Switch 2 releases, and finally universal crossplay as the cherry on top. And before somebody comments it, no, I will not count the arcade cabinets from Yakuza games as official releases for PC and Xbox. This game wasn't meant to be a huge release by any means. I'd say it's more of a testing ground for features in the next Virtua Fighter project. Mainly crossplay and netcode stuff. And this game is actually most noteworthy for being developed once again by AM2 and RGG. And that brings us to today. Virtua Fighter 6 was teased at the Game Awards in 2024, just before Revo released. This was followed with the Virtua Fighter Direct, where RGG Studio and AM2 discussed the future of Virtua Fighter. But ignoring the actual VF stuff shown, I think there's one part of the show that's super relevant. At the end of the Direct, there's a special segment featuring former AM2 director Yu Suzuki. This was more of a cutesy formality than anything because, to be clear, Suzuki left Sega a long time ago. He was asked to give a few words for Virtua Fighter's 30th anniversary, and he talked about how pretty the games are today. But when asked what he thought about the announcement of the new Virtua Fighter game, Suzuki said, "The backgrounds in particular are a variety of Asian themes, which I like. The detailed renditions were quite noteworthy to me. I faintly feel some similarities with Shenmue." And that's because it is Shenmue. And while he could be saying this because he's known as the creator of Virtua Fighter and Shenmue, there's a more obvious reason. By adding a story mode to Virtua Fighter, RGG Studio is retracing the steps of Suzuki-san. Because even with the degrees of separation over the decades, Yakuza is Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter 6 is soon to release, and of course is being developed by RGG Studio. I've had a lot of issues with RGG as of late, but in this instance, this is the best case scenario. And that's because it's not the same RGG Studio. Like I mentioned way at the start of the video, the VF6 team is separate from the team for the Yakuza games. But they're both RGG to the core, because even though AM2's been absorbed into RGG Studio, they're still doing the one thing they do best, and that's to make Virtua Fighter. And even with separate teams making separate games, they're more connected than ever, sharing resources and both bleeding their own style into the other. Even if RGG and AM2 never linked up, and the Virtua Fighter games continued on under a separate studio, these games would still be connected forever, because Virtua Fighter is Shenmue, and Shenmue is Yakuza, and Yakuza is Virtua Fighter. What am I trying to say at this point? I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to say there's no better place for Virtua Fighter to be. Now, there's loads of interesting questions to ask in future videos, like will they add any RGG guest characters, or will Virtua Fighter finally have good music? I'm kidding. Kinda. Anyway, thanks so much for hearing me out. I just wanted to make a video that could clarify the history ranging from Yakuza to Virtua Fighter, and hopefully somebody watching this learned something. And if I missed something or you want to add some context, please leave a comment so we can learn a little bit more. Also, be sure to leave a like and hype this video. That's a feature, right? Yeah, let's make sure to hype this video. Oh god. Whether you're here as a fan of Yakuza, Virtua Fighter, or even Shenmue, I hope it's clear now that we all have more in common than we may have thought. And with that, thank you so much for watching. And in the next video, we'll talk about why Street Fighter 6 World Tour Mode is Kurohyo.